how eye color gets determined in fruit flies. We're doing this so we can understand how sex influences inheritance. Our success criteria is being able to describe sex-linked genes. So one of the traits that Morgan studied in his fruit flies was eye color. We'll talk a little bit more about fruit fly eye color later on, but it's basically an order of inheritance. There's a variety of different colors like red, orange, amber, and white. The two most well known, however, are the red color and the white color. Red is commonly known because this is the most common phenotype in nature. It often gets called the wild type as a result. And white is commonly known because it's the most common mutation to eye color. In fact, it can be fairly predictably demonstrated, the white mutation, in a sufficiently large fruit fly population that is not being selected upon. The red color is dominant, the white color is recessive, but we see something interesting when we breed two red-eyed flies together. Usually what we end up with is we end up with a 3-to-1 phenotypic ratio. Instead of our expected, all four of them will have red eyes. This often happens if, first off, you need to have the female as a heterozygote. So the female has to possess both the X big W and the X little w, or sometimes we say XW plus and XW. Those are for red and white respectively. The male will have the XW plus and Y. So this is different because females, and remember when we talk male and female in genetics in grade 12, we're strictly talking chromosomal. Females have two X chromosomes, male has an X and a Y. But eye color is on the X chromosome. It's not on the Y chromosome. So what that means is that the female flies here have two copies of the gene, so they can be homozygous or heterozygous. The males only have a single copy. They only get one copy determining eye color. So what's happening? Well, sometimes the female passes on the red gene, sometimes she passes on the white gene. If the white gene gets paired up with a Y chromosome, that is the only allele present. There's no red allele coming from the male because in order to get male offspring, he has to pass on the Y chromosome. So you end up with 1 out of 4 offspring being a white-eyed male. This is what we call sex linkage. Specifically, it's called X linkage because it's on the X chromosome. Y linkage is also possible, but it's much rarer. There's actually not a huge number of genes that we commonly track on the Y chromosome. Females will have two X chromosomes, again, chromosomally female. Females will have two X chromosomes, so they can inherit traits normally, or they can be heterozygotes, but the males get the X and the Y. So if you have an X-linked trait, males will only have one copy of that gene, which means if they get the recessive allele, they'll have the recessive phenotype. So a consequence of this is that traits like hemophilia and red-green color blindness, which are both X-linked, are more commonly demonstrated in men. I should note as well, these are both recessive conditions. So the recessive conditions will show up more often in the males of the population because there's no such thing as a male carrier for an X-linked trait. If the male has the allele, he has the phenotype as well. There is no difference between phenotype and genotype here. There's no heterozygotes. So the females can hide the traits, but the males cannot. So you can have female heterozygotes that have the copy of that allele, but don't show that phenotype. This is why we say that things like hemophilia get passed on from the mothers, because they are. The X chromosome that a son who is hemophiliac is inheriting is coming from the mother, because the Y chromosome has to come from the father. And we say that because the mother doesn't have the trait in most cases. It is certainly possible for a man who has hemophilia to have a son who has hemophilia, but the son didn't get the allele from his father. The mother has to be a carrier of that allele in order for it to get passed on. The X chromosome always goes from mother to son. If you're talking about a daughter, then yeah, she's going to get an X chromosome from both parents. And in fact, you know what's going to be on her X chromosome from dad because he only has one to pass on. And you have a phenotype that goes along with, did dad pass along the X or the Y chromosome? So we can actually track the inheritance of sex-linked traits fairly easily. And the interesting thing here is normally you could add sex in and make a dihybrid cross, but you don't actually have to here because the inheritance of the X-linked traits is tied to the inheritance of the X or Y chromosome. So it's going to determine both the chromosomal sex of the offspring as well as the phenotypes of any genes on the X chromosome. Now, that might make you think, okay, the female has 2 X chromosomes, the male has 1. Isn't that going to be unbalanced? And yes, it is. So what actually happens in the female body is something that we call bar bodies. Basically, it's the random inactivation of one of the X chromosomes in each of a woman's cells. And this happens at a fairly young age. It doesn't have a big impact on humans. But there are some fairly famous cases of it, not necessarily the one you think of, though. Calico cats or tortoiseshell cats. They're always female. Well, why is that? It's because the fur color allele in the domestic cat, or the gene is located on the X chromosome. It's X-linked. So if you have a heterozygous female cat who has black allele and orange allele for fur color, what actually happens is there's random inactivation of one of the X chromosomes while the embryo is developing, and that leads to these patches of orange and black fur all over the body because only one of those 2 alleles is being expressed.